right. So we are back. Hello, great ones. Welcome to another episode of the Live and Be Great podcast. I am your host, spiritual psychological life coach, Latonya McDonald. And today we have a special guest. We have Mr. Ron Sowers. Okay. He is also an ADHD coach and the author of host of Don't Mind Me, I Just Have ADHD. Okay. And he has a mission of helping men over 40 reclaim their identity and leadership that struggle with ADHD, especially those men that may not come to grips with the fact that they had ADHD, or maybe there's some shame around there. Maybe they never got the support. Okay. Ron Sowers is doing the good work to support those people. So today we're going to reframe ADHD, not just as a flaw, but a superpower, because that's what it is, right? When it comes to ADHD, you guys know I have it. All right. I talk about it all the time. You can kind of tell if you listen to all of my episodes how I can go from one topic to the next. Okay. I have no idea how I got there, but I think it's great to have this conversation and get it from a different perspective on this episode. So I'm excited to have you, Ron. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your show. It's an honor and a privilege.
Yes, yes, yes. So I want to ask you, you often describe ADHD as a different operating system. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah. Well, so basically, and in my understanding is like there's nothing really wrong with like the brain in the way that it's been formed. It's just more about like mine just operates a little bit differently, and I've got to figure out like how that works. Like, what do I need to do? Because it's not going to run like a normal software on like a computer. It's
Mhm.
going to be a little bit different. And that really shows up for me in like that creativity, that be able to like my ability to be able to problem solve like on another level, be able to relate different things, seemingly unrelated things, and like bring them together in such a way. And like for me, that shows up in that the way that I coach and you know combining like mindfulness with character strengths with being pro-social and then layering that with like that emotional resilience. So I believe that all of those things really need to come into the picture in order for there to be like a significant transformation.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, all those do need to be into picture and redefining like how you feel about having ADHD. And how would you say, how does the shift move people away from the shame into empowerment in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean it's just about understanding like how to speak up about like, hey, first there has to come that acceptance of like, look, this is who I am. It's
Mm,
not going to change, but I can get better at like managing the things. So once you understand that instead of being a problem, it's more of a
mhm,
challenge to overcome, then you can come up with solutions. When you don't know what you have or how to get to like or you don't admit that you have a problem, there's no way that you can ever get to like that part of it that you understand the solutions, and that you can't get the help that you need because you don't even think you need any help. You just continue
exactly.
to just go through life drifting, and that's what I did for much of my life, and like I used to, you know, do a lot of drugs when I was younger,
Mm,
and you know, even but I've been clean for 6 years now, and
congratulations.
that's thank you. And that journey was a part of that journey of like understanding that acceptance through that is like I'm an addict. And then I understood that I also have ADHD. So like finding out the solutions there help build a foundation for me to like really work on, that acceptance of the ADHD. And even through that process, like I got a deeper acceptance of like who I really am. And
Mhm,
like when I understand like how I work, like there's a lot less shame
mhm,
involved because like I'm not looking at it like, "Oh, well, I need to be like this person or I need to be like that person." Even somebody that has ADHD, like we're all on a different spectrum. So like your ADHD is not going to show up like my ADHD.
Mhm,
Yours is very like colorful and in your face, and like
mhm,
mine's more like, yeah, I love the colors, but mine shows up more in like different things like creation of film and ideas and like
mhm,
whatever that looks like. And it shows up differently in other people when I accept that as like my unique ability, and then I layer that in with like God doesn't make mistakes, so like I understand like, well, what are my talents and what do I need to use them for in my life? And
mhm.
I don't have to really look at other people and like
Right.
measure up to them, because like I understand they have their own gifts. They have their own purpose that God gave
Mhm.
them.
Right. Okay. Yeah, the purpose. You are uniquely designed, every last one of us, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I share a perspective of like, what if you chose everything in your life, right? What if you have like a soul contract and this is part of your journey and your
Mhm.
whole life experiences is remembering why, right? Why did I decide to come here? What is my purpose? Remembering that purpose and why you needed to go through the things that you've gone through. And definitely congratulations on your sobriety, like, that's awesome, and, I know, like, I
Thank you.
in that process, right, you do have to acknowledge that you have an issue, you know?
Yeah.
So, it's amazing that now that has led you to also accept the ADHD, because I know addiction is probably one of it even more harder for people to accept that, they have a problem with that. So, I understand the direct line, to acceptance and removing that shame in the work that you have done. Right? Very,
Thank
very,
you.
very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. So why do you think that a lot of adults usually find out or discover that they have ADHD in later in life?
Yeah, I think that, it's just usually through pain. Like I know my story was like I've heard people talking about maybe I have ADHD, and I think the major thing that really stopped me from really pursuing that was there wasn't enough reasons for me to check it out. And there's always reasons underneath those reasons if you
Mhm,
dig deep enough. And I believe that it was the fear that I didn't want to admit that, I was broken, and because, in the beginning, like I definitely did feel like once the elation, like, and the pink cloud really like faded, I was
mhm,
like, wow, I'm not normal anymore. Like I'm broken, and it took me a long time to really fully accept that, because like when I found out, like my idea of it was like, I'm going to do everything in my power to fix this.
mhm,
Like I can make it better. I can make it go away if I do X amount of therapy, or if I do whatever this X plus Y plus Z, which
mhm.
doesn't equal fixed. It just
Right.
means like I've just done some good work and I've gotten good during that period. But once I stop doing the things that help maintain that, then I'm going to go back to what my mind originally, figured out, because those pathways don't like just go away. So it's
Yeah,
really about like understanding that and continuing to do the work, continuing to do what I need to do on a daily basis. That, when I do this,
mm,
like my life turns better. And what really reinforces that for me is like the days that I don't do it, because
mm,
like I know the difference. I see it and I'm like, wow, I'm really not showing up that well the way I know I'm capable of. and
mhm.
and you know and I often like, will show up not how I would like to in the relationships that I've been able to build because
Yeah,
of my own personal understanding.
yeah. So, to piggyback off of what you were saying,
Mhm.
um, I didn't find out that I mean, I knew I had it, and I knew my parents had it because, like, being on the phone with my parents when I was younger, if I would call them, I'll be talking about something and then the subject will just change out of
Yeah.
nowhere. Or my dad, that was mainly my mom, but my dad I'll be talking about whatever it is on my mind. And then if we're listening to the radio at the same time, he's like, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm getting deep here, right? How it shows up. And when your parents don't know that they have it, the childhood, okay,
Yeah.
it's a whole big, it's a massive projection as to, okay, well, why can't you keep your room clean, or why can't you focus, or whatever the case may be. So whatever was passed down to them, like the ideas of why they weren't normal, right? That shame that comes, it gets passed down on to you. So it's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
even bigger struggle to realize and start to retell the truth on who you are and your issues, right? Like when you're able to connect it back to, like I just did with, those conversations with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it can start to make sense. Like, no, you're not stupid, you're not unfocused, you just have ADHD, right? The
Yeah.
problem is you focus a lot, really,
Yeah.
and your brain is just working at a very, very, very quick pace when it is compared to, people who I really don't even know if there's a lot of people who don't have ADHD and can do this whole perfect student thing. I feel like that is actually more rare. But we've
Yeah.
been programmed to believe that we're the ones who don't have it together just because we're acknowledging that, no, you cannot put me in the same room every single day and I still be enthusiastic about learning if my mind isn't stimulated, right? And how I like to also, when it comes to the esoteric sciences, like there's the psychological aspect of ADHD, right? And when I discovered astrology and human design, astrology, there's certain placements in your chart that kind of show you how you think, right? And it makes sense how you process information. Like for instance, I have something called a Pisces in the sign of Mercury. And if you've been around Pisces, I am one, right? They always say Pisces are in this dream world, right? They're in this fantasy land, okay? But they're very intuitive. So I can easily explain how somebody else is feeling. But when it comes to how I feel about my own emotions, it's
Yeah.
very difficult for me to explain with that placement there, right? And then when it comes to the ADHD, in human design, there's something called a manifesting generator. And when you think of a manifesting generator, think of the clown that has the plates and on the sticks, and there's a bunch of plates spinning at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same time, right? And then every once in a while, a plate will drop, but they never clean it up. So us, right? Oftentimes you might have that energy of a manifesting generator that has to always be doing a bunch of things at the same exact time. But it doesn't mean that you might hear, oh, why can't you just focus on one thing? Like, why you got this job and now you got this job and now you got this job and now you're doing this and now you're moving here and now you're like, why can't you just focus on one thing? But us 88, us manifesting generators, we have kind of figured out that we were never supposed to, right? And
Yeah.
when we come in, us with that superpower, when you turn that ADHD into a superpower, when we come in, we are there to support the people who feel like they have to stay where they're at just because that so-called makes them successful or makes them look like a good person, right? We come
Yeah.
in there and say, but you're not happy. I see you light up when you do this, this, and this, but you're doing this,
Yeah.
right? So that part, just putting that all together with the generational trauma, accepting or understanding yourself instead of trying to put yourself in a box can be so helpful when it comes to the the healing journey, right? And we touched a little bit just now about the shame, right? When it comes to not being able to stick with one thing, or, getting bored, you know what I'm saying, with one thing and wanting to move on to the next. What do you feel like are creative patterns um, that do you what creative patterns do you consistently see in ADHD minds, like when you connect with other ADHD people?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I want to just recognize that you have a powerful story as well. I mean, like being
Yeah.
able to have ADHD and like help other Black women, and
Mhm.
like like because historically you guys don't really have a lot of care and support, and for you to be able to develop that and pursue that and continue to follow through on that is amazing.
Yes.
So I just wanted to let you know, like, there's a lot of different things that go on. And to kind of answer your question is like that creativity, like, it's about looking at potential in other people,
Mhm.
and seeing that potential, and it can be difficult, for some on any neurodivergent or
Yeah.
just people in general, because we're so used to that shame, and like we're trying to fix ourselves and make ourselves fit in to
Mhm.
whatever system, and that creates a lot of disruption, and we're spending all this energy on this thing that people don't even see us spending all this energy on. So there's like this trauma of like learning a new thing. And to kind of speak on what you're saying is like, I feel like for every superhero, they always have like a weakness. Like
Yeah.
Superman has kryptonite,
Mhm.
like the same thing with us is like,
Yeah.
I feel like the biggest thing, at least in my experience, is follow through. So like being
Mhm.
able to follow through, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, I love, my brain can go in 1,000 different directions and they're all great to me. But like what I've really understood is like I can really only do like maybe 1 to 2 things that I can focus on and be
Mhm.
really good and just go deep into those, and developing that discipline to like, and that doesn't come by myself. I need to have other people in my life. I need to have a
Yeah.
coach. Like I have like a couple coaches like to 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 do the different things. And what's worked for me is like, understanding my purpose, understanding like, okay, is this going to get me closer to my goals of what I really want to be, and really defining like what those goals are of like, like if I don't do this, what's my life going to look
Mm.
like versus like, oh, if what I have to do to get to where I need to go.
Yeah.
If I can see like what my life's going to look like in 5 years, if I
Mhm.
don't do that, it's much more motivating for me to do it what I need to do on a daily basis, because yeah, like, trust me, like, I'm so into what I'm doing, but
Mhm.
and I'm so into the value that it's gonna
Mhm.
bring, but at the same time, like, I still have ADHD, I still have,
Yes.
like, doubts, I still have those moments where my dopamine's not hitting. So
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh, I gotta do that." I'm like, that's where I go back to that refocus, and I have those
Mhm.
things in my life and those people in my life that can remind me of like what I'm doing and check in and be like, where are you at on this process? Like, and being okay with like, maybe I didn't get everything that I needed to get done, but I'm doing
Mhm.
the best that I can.
Yes, 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 yes. So you're doing the best that you can. You got your support system, which is good. Your checkers acknowledging, like, okay, I know I was supposed to be done with this like an hour ago. Okay, who do I need to call or check in or tap? What triggers or support, reminders can I put around in my space to remind me, okay, why I'm doing this and why I want to follow through with this. Because usually, if it's the thing that you constantly think about, that's usually the thing you want to make sure you follow through on, right? Especially if it lights you up, you don't want to,
Yeah.
you kind of feel like, I told all these people that I wanted to finish this, so I need to finish it. But also, sometimes there needs to be a difference. Like, if you're not feeling it anymore, sometimes you need to figure out how to get that permission. And like you said, you have that coach, and a coach or a therapist can give you that permission to let it go, right? And
Yeah.
move on to the next thing that lights you up without the shame, without the guilt, which is easier said than done, okay? It is
Of
easier
course.
said than done. I probably have hundreds of projects, crafts, dance pieces, scripts, hundreds of them, videos, pictures, so many different things that I just have that I know that I'm never going to pick back up
Yeah.
ever again. But the guilt is still a process. It's still a process to go through, right? So what do you
Yeah.
feel like the difference is between chaos and like intuitive intelligence when it comes to trying to follow through and making that shift?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's simple, and, like, to touch on what you were saying is like
Mhm.
it's like those ideas and those things, they're like the graveyard of like dreams or whatever, and you're like, man, you're kind of like I
Mhm.
try, but I look at those things. There's so many things that I've failed at, and so
Mhm.
many things that didn't work out, and I don't really look at them as failures. I look at them as just learning experiences.
Yes, yes.
It's really just about changing the frame of your mind instead
Mhm.
of saying like, and it's especially those doubts. Like those
Mhm.
doubts like killed so many dreams. Like you
Yeah.
look at Vincent van Gogh, he had severe depression, was probably had ADHD,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
ended up killing himself, and his paintings are, and there's people that debate whether that his paintings are rare, that's why they went up, but I don't believe that is that significant, because you look at other ones like Picasso, and he was
Yeah.
very successful in his time, and he was probably one of the most successful artists. So it's really about looking at like changing that frame. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
if I can do this, to what happens if I do this? What are the
Mhm.
possibilities of like, because it's like your brain is going to only do like what you ask it to do. And
Yeah.
if you're constantly telling it, well, we need to fail, or
Yeah.
I'm not good at this, or
Mhm.
I'm never good at any diets, like it's going to make sure that you're never good at any diets. But
Mhm.
if you start to believe that, look, I'm going to be good at this. Like I'm going to hit this weight, I'm going to hit this goal, I'm going to do whatever it takes because I know I'm going to do this. I can do this.
Yeah.
Your brain's going to all of a sudden switch, over time. Like, I'm not saying it's just gonna be like a lightning, like, you flip a switch and your brain's like, "Well, this is all I needed to do." But, like, over
Right.
time, like, you'll develop those pathways, because that's how your brain really, really operates, is like every time you do something new and develop a new habit, it creates like a little un un unreadable like line and impression on that part of your brain. And those other parts of your brain, that those habits that you want to change, are deep grooved. But
Yeah.
over time, you can start making that groove deep by continuing to repeat it. But you've got to continue to have like those incantations
Yeah.
that like literally you're speaking this out in the morning and when you go to bed, like, I'm going, whatever that is, I'm going to be, I'm going to have 1 million followers on TikTok. I'm going to have 1 million followers on TikTok, or I'm going to be a millionaire by in 12 months.
Mhm.
Like these things are going to happen. You start to see that, and your brain starts to come up and see things that it's never seen before to
Yeah.
make that happen.
Yeah. That definitely that makes sense. Like what you tell yourself is the truth, point blank and period. Even how you judge other people, right? That
Yeah.
because you
Oh, yeah,
haven't
and
accepted your
even
ADHD.
even that is like
Mhm.
celebrating other people's success.
Yeah.
When you do that and you're great, like that changes your whole outlook. Like,
Mhm.
you're probably not going to be successful if you wish doom and gloom on. It's kind of like a self-reflection.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's literally going to happen to you. Like, do you wonder why you're not like successful? Maybe you got to take a look at like, when other people are successful around you, do you celebrate that? I know it can be difficult in the beginning. I didn't do it always. I would be like, man, like, especially when I first got in this field, I was like, why are they successful? Or why
Yeah.
do they like them? Like, no, like you got to kind of turn that into a positive. Like, well, why do they like them? Let
Yeah.
me look at what they're doing and maybe kinda do some of what they're doing because a lot of the stuff that like is successful, like
Yeah.
you can apply back into your life.
Yeah, you could do it too. And then also you gotta acknowledge like your gifts as well. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, ADHD, sometimes it is like, well, how can you first of all, people are like, well, how are you a dancer, but you are also a therapist? And you do you create crafts and all these other different things. You're intuitive. Now you're into, you're into spirituality, and you're really good at all these different things, right? The acceptance is also a thing. Like, okay, yeah, I am a genius. The end. Like that's how like I had to just go ahead and accept, instead of the shame of, everybody being programmed. Okay, if you're good at this one thing, you do this forever, right?
Yeah.
And not the multifaceted is not usually, accepted or appreciated. Like if they see a rapper or a singer try to act, people are judging them
Oh yeah.
10 times harder, but there's still a lot of them. Like back in the day, you used to have to be a triple threat, okay?
Mm.
And you see like somebody, for instance, like Jamie Foxx, who can sing, who's a
Yeah.
comedian, and is an amazing actor, right?
Yeah.
If you see
Yeah.
somebody like that, okay, that is who we were talking about, inspiration. Look at them instead of trying to put yourself in a box, or maybe try to shame someone else just because you've been told and you've
Yeah.
accepted that you're just supposed to stay with one thing. Look for your superheroes. And if you don't see one, right, maybe it's supposed to be you,
Yeah.
and that's something that I've accepted in my journey, that I am supposed to be a leader, right? And going
Yeah.
through all of my different charts, like the charts basically gave me confirmation. There was always a question, why I gotta be the one to do it? I know all y'all in this room see that this is wrong. Why do I have to do it? Right? But the truth of the matter is I was meant to.
Mm.
That's my design. And that's how, you start to use the things that you were taught were supposed to break you or make you less capable as your superpower, right? And
Yeah.
also, we gotta do your chart one day, Ron, but
Yeah.
the the human design part, there's something called like a sacral response, right? And if you know anything about the chakra system, and the sacral
Mhm.
response is your gut feeling. When we talk about gut feelings, like, oh, I have gut feeling that I should do this or do that, right? So
Yeah.
naturally, when someone asks you a yes no question from a very young age, you're gonna go, uh-huh or uh-uh, right?
Yeah.
But you're taught no, you either say yes or no, right? But that gut is actually the right way to do it, the right way to make certain decisions, right?
Yeah.
And human design, because I'm a manifesting generator, but in a psychological sense, I have AD. I can set up a walk with a friend and say, I'm going for a walk, right? I could get to the door and feel like, okay, I don't want to go no more. And just call them and say, okay, I'm not going. Right? It would be shame there with other people, but with me, oftentimes when I don't listen to my gut, something bad happens. Right?
Yeah.
You get some sort of inclination, and
Mm.
there's some people that have the gift to just stop. Right? And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be those ADHDers that have acknowledged that they have the ADHD. And
Yeah.
then the ones who, haven't realized they have it or haven't done the work on themselves to see, okay, well, why do I think the way that I do? Why do certain things happen to me? The ones that haven't, they will find themselves committing to things that don't make them happy, and it ends up draining the life out of them. Doing those charts and getting that understanding, okay, this is probably why I can do all these different things and not break a sweat. Like just be fine and or somebody come look at my computer. Why you got all these tabs on your computer? Right? The biggest fear of an ADHDer is forgetting, right? If I find it, I want it to be right there in my face. So I don't have to
Yeah,
go
or
looking
those
for it.
tabs disappearing.
Yes. No, 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 no. I found it. I need it right here. I don't care if you get overwhelmed when you look at my computer. Don't use it, okay? But this is I need this here. I need to be able to see it, okay, until I work through it or not work through it because, hey, that's part of that acceptance, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But, speaking about that and that decision making and those gut feelings and things of that nature, like a big, big thing is, which I'm so happy that you are a male doing this work, right? The pressure. Like, how did you overcome that pressure to be vulnerable? And how do you I would say how do you teach other men how to really, really embrace that vulnerability when it comes to ADHD.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And to go kind of put that like preface it is like the world wouldn't be the same without people with ADHD. I believe that some of the greatest breakthroughs in life and even in the Bible have been from people with ADHD. And that's why I believe that we're like God has given us like a special gift, and a lot of times that gift is so shamed, because like people see it, people really see the potential. And, a lot of times they may not actually see it because they don't see it the way that God sees it.
Mhm,
So for me, with that, vulnerability was like I learned a lot of that from being in, Narcotics Anonymous. So we would talk about our stories and like, but some of the things were difficult to say, because there would be a lot of like compulsion and you know, especially with females and like,
mhm,
that has been one of my biggest things is like objectifying women and
mhm,
like, really accepting that like I need to really improve the way that I look at women as just as more than just objects of sex. Like
mhm,
they have they're someone's daughter, there might be someone's mother, they have feelings, they are also another addict. Like they're
mhm,
like I've had got to see them as like more human than like just literally something that's just trying to help me feel good in the moment, which
mhm,
isn't going to last. And where is that coming from in me? So that's like really helped me to explore that. But even on the next level of like understanding, like talking about it on your podcast has been another
mhm.
level of vulnerability because it's okay to
Yeah,
do it in the rooms, but
yeah.
then, there's this whole thing about autonomy. And like, I was one, it's like, should I really tell them that? Would somebody trust me as a coach if
Mhm,
they knew I was an addict? Or like if I want to be, more of a voice of, like they want to look at me, will that dim that light? Honestly, like,
mhm,
and it goes back to God. It's like we
mhm,
all have he's given us these stories for a reason, and these
mhm.
story every one of our stories is powerful, original, and unique to be able to
Yeah.
help bring others closer to God. So
Mhm,
like I believe that we need to talk about more addicts need to come out and so that people can understand like these are somebody's children, and
mhm,
this is going to continue to happen if we continue to push this in the dark and ignore it and not and just fix the symptoms and not really go to the root of the problem, which is like the system that we're living in isn't conducive of growth. It creates this drug problem to begin with,
mhm.
because people don't understand like that it's an emotional trauma from
Yes.
early on, that a lot of drug addicts, like it's usually an intense trauma that's happened in their life early on because of either it's mostly neglect because of a parent, either shamed them or wasn't there or disappeared. And like that is one of the biggest fears of most people is that abandonment,
Yeah.
and that's why a lot of people turn away from God as well, as like they feel like they've been abandoned, or they're just so afraid of being abandoned again that they don't want to put themselves and become vulnerable. But that's
Mhm.
actually the one thing that's only going to help you to grow and to understand who you really are is by telling other people and having other people be like that. that's like me. That connection through that pain is so powerful and what I've seen in my life.
I love that. That fear, that of being judged, that identity, unfortunately, because of the westernized society and the cultural structure, specifically in America, it's all connected. The lack of vulnerability when there is racism, when there is sexism, and things of that nature, it does come from the lack of, because when you're not vulnerable and you don't accept your shortcomings, you do go and look for somebody else to step on. You just do. You
Yeah.
go and look for somebody else that you feel like is not doing as good as you to make yourself feel better. When you can't face that, when you can't face yourself, when you can't face or you feel like, okay, this is something wrong just because it hurts, right? And when you talked about the addiction and being in those meetings, I often, of course, because I have my degree in psychology and over 5,000 hours of clinical experience working with multi different types of populations. But when it comes to addiction, I've been able to look at it as, okay, with the ADHDers, the dopamine, that's the thing that gets us focused. That's the thing that gets us excited to even start something, right?
Yeah.
But also when you connect that to addiction, it's I want to feel good right now because my real life hurts, right? My real
Yeah.
life is so painful right now. If I can just feel good, then maybe I could get through the day. Maybe I could do the things that people will say that I need to be doing to be a good person, to not be lazy, to not be shameful or worthless or whatever, those dark things that come into your head when you've experienced trauma and you don't feel like you have a safe space to express it, you go within, right? So
Yeah.
it's a constant fight. Of course, having to have these conversations with children of addicts or parents of addicts or siblings or friends of addicts. They take it personal. Like, was I not worth you
Yeah.
getting it together? No, it has nothing to do with you, right? Or if I see a parent of an addict, I'm like, we got to talk about what is the truth because there's a reason why your child felt like they couldn't come to you.
Yeah.
So we can't sweep whatever that is under the rug. Like, I can't look at that parent any longer as a perfect parent and that they have nothing to do with it because somewhere, whether it's intentionally or not, somewhere in that dynamic, that child felt unsafe, right? And
Yeah.
then we talk about the societal pressures. You aren't supposed to cry. Little boys aren't supposed to cry. You're supposed to be tough, regardless of whether, your finger is spewing blood, then not cry. So that part, it is definitely danger. And if you have everybody around you, okay, when you talked about how you were able to finally acknowledge your view on women, that came from that societal teaching and who is around you and what they
Yeah.
normalize. Men are supposed to be this and women are supposed to be that. Forget about the in between. There's no in between. You either do this or do that. Or, as a parent looking at a child, if you do this or do that, if you're a girl, be a girl. If you're a boy, be a boy. Or that means I'm a bad parent. So I don't want to hear anything outside of you doing exactly
Yeah.
what they said you are supposed to do, right? So, do you think that it's even more difficult at the age, men over 40 to really grapple with that? Or have you kind of looked at it as like how I look at things? You were meant to find out when you were meant to find out. Because, of course, I like to say that in the beginning, I wish somebody would have known, that this is what I was struggling with instead of, making me feel shameful as to why I couldn't do certain things that, we were told we're supposed to do. Like, which way do you look at it as far as finding out and dealing with okay, this may be my issue, ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, like, it can go both ways, but I feel, I honestly feel, and I go from my own experiences, like, that once they get to that age of 40, it's like, you see a lot of them. It's like that midlife crisis shows up. Their life's not how they pictured it. It's so far from that like well, I should be further, like, and they start to go inside themselves and start to look for the answers. And
Mm,
once you start doing that, like, then it opens up that door for you to be, like, vulnerable and to
mhm,
be, open to seeking the help that you need,
yeah,
and I feel, it always goes back to that story that God's given you. Like,
mm,
I believe that, he's always had a plan for each and every one of us. And, we may regret the things that we went through,
mhm,
but they were meant to do that so that, like, we have the story that we have. Like, I can relate to guys, like, when I talked about God, or when I'm trying to go through, so many more people that are, like, have ADHD, have depression, have addiction, because I've lived that and I've
mhm,
shown that I can, like, who I am now. Most people don't even believe I have ADHD. They don't believe that I get depressed. They don't
mhm,
believe those things because, like, I don't allow those things to have the hold that they had in the past, because, like, my mindset is shift. Like, I know who I am. I know my purpose. That's why I believe that, like, having that relationship with God and being vulnerable is such a strength, because,
mhm,
like, you have to be able to, like, it when you're able to talk about those things,
mhm,
no one can use that against you,
right,
because you've already told them. Like, most of the reasons why you're afraid to be vulnerable is because somebody's going to use that against you. But once you
mhm,
used it, and people do. But I look at those people now as, like, they're dealing with their own trauma,
mhm,
and they haven't gotten to a place of acceptance that I have. And I just really pray for them and understand and hope that they get to a place that, they can really see life in a better view.
yeah,
It's such a powerful thing. And to relate back to those parents, there's not really a bad parent. They're going through their own trauma, and they were doing the best to raise you the only way that they were raised. So it's
mhm,
like generational. It keeps coming back. So it's like, yes, you have to understand where the root is, and you've got to point that out, but
mhm,
you've got to do it in a way that, gives both sides grace, for, like, we're both human, we both make mistakes,
yeah,
and this is an opportunity to, like, grow, because we can really talk about that on a deeper
mhm,
level, but you've got to kind of go through your own process with it, with somebody else,
yes,
hopefully a therapist, or
mhm,
so a professional, or a coach, like
mhm,
that you feel safe talking about those things. And, like, maybe sometime, like, for me, like, I had a lot of emotional trauma from my dad, and,
mm,
like, I really had to give myself those moments, but, like, let my inner child, like, just get it all out, like, how
mhm,
much I hated him, how much, like, this really, like, I wish he did this, and, like, this was so bad, like, just get all that out, so
mhm,
so I'm not carrying it anymore. So
yeah,
I can move on and then see my dad as, like, well, he went through so much more physical trauma from his dad. And looking at it that way, like, I've been able to see him as, like, he did a really good job on that
mhm,
level. But with
yeah,
the thing with trauma is, like, it's like you said, boys may not be able to cry
mhm,
because their fingers gushing blood. Well, I don't even think that's the worst pain. I
mhm,
think the worst pain that you have is that emotional pain that you can't talk about.
yeah,
Uh, you know, whether you can cry or feel sad as a
mhm,
man.
yeah. I definitely love that. And hopefully, if you're listening, that we're creating a safe space for you, no matter who you are or how you identify, as to have this conversation. And you may not agree with everything. It might be certain things that trigger you, but everybody at the end of the day, you got to choose the path that is right for you when it comes to heal. Like some
Yeah.
people may need to make certain definites as to, okay, I can't use your way because
Oh, yeah.
that is where I have a lot of pain, right? So I got to go this way, you know? And I'm talking about, like, for example, when we talk about spirituality, and Ron mentioned that, God is, his source to help him with a lot of the way he feels about himself, the teachings, the forgiveness, the grace, and things of that nature. We might have some listeners that God is actually a trigger for them.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that we hold space for you too, right? At the end of the day, as long as you're being good to yourself, you'll be able to be good to other people. And that's the main thing. Like, we want healthy people who are going after their dreams and aren't letting, the differences of how their brain, is made up, or, the trauma or their perception of the things that they've gone through stop them from living their best life and seeking that support however they see fit, right? Because
Yeah.
you'll know, and you can't be afraid to, as coaches and as people in the field that help other people, it's really, I've already, figured out, for me, it's the story that helps heal people. It's
Yeah.
one day you're going to meet the person that you went through what you went through for. You're going to meet them, right? And when you
Yeah.
do, it is magical. Okay. And that's usually the clients that I do have, they usually have a similar story to what I've gone through, or somebody very, very close to me has gone through. And it's like, okay, yep, that's why that happened. Okay, I've
Yeah.
met
Yeah.
you, and you're basically the light at the end of the tunnel, or the solution, or okay, so I can get through this because my coach or my therapist, like, sees a way out when I didn't see one, right?
Yeah.
And that's usually the time when I feel like you're supposed to get some sort of support, however you see fit, because it's a safe space here, right? And as far
Yeah.
as good person, bad person, yes, there does need to be a clear definition. There does, because there are people who know that they have these issues and refuse to get the help, and continue to shame people, continue to hurt and harm people, right? Those
Yeah.
people you do need to protect yourself from, because they have made a decision to not change, and that everybody
Oh,
else
yeah.
just has to deal with it, and they're to continue to bring harm and destruction. And then they have the people who are acknowledging it, but have not figured out that some of those people who have decided not to change, and sometimes those might be your parents who won't acknowledge that, hey, I
Yeah.
didn't have it all the way together, right? You can forgive them and understand their story, but forgiveness does not mean access, right? Still, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
keep yourself safe, even, with partners and spouses and siblings and friends. If that person is causing harm to your life, right? It is okay to
Yeah.
protect yourself and find your peace. You can understand their story. I understand every last person's story in my family that I have loved. I do the work. I've been that way since I was a little girl. Somebody could yell at me, and I know I didn't do anything. And my instant reaction is, maybe they're having a bad day. And I'd have to have that friend, or like a parent, or another family member be like, no, this person does not mean well for you. Stay away from this person, okay? But wait, I understand. You have to, for us
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are extremely empathetic, we do
You
have
gotta
to
love it from a
find,
distance.
yes, you have to love on them from a distance. They don't have to be in your space, okay? And if you need to define them as not a good person for you to be around, it's okay to do that, right? And
Yeah.
protect yourself so you can pull through, right? And
Yeah.
I want to say, Ron, we talked about, I mentioned your book in the intro, right? I want to say, I want to ask you briefly, like, what inspired you to create the self-discovery journal for adults with ADHD?
Yeah. I definitely had that created that book because I wanted a resource for men, especially, but adults, because I understand, like, I actually get, quite a bit of women, listening to my podcast. And get the journals, and which is interesting. But
Mhm.
like men don't really have it. So I wanted to create this area of like, because it's the questions that are important that you
Mhm.
continue to ask. And a lot
Mhm.
of times we don't have access to those questions. And some people just don't have the resources to get to a therapist. And it can be difficult. So I
Mhm.
wanted to have like this journal format that had prompts above it. And you can go through it in your own time and really just
Mhm.
explore like things like, well, why does somebody's, like when they criticize me, it feels different than other people do. Like when a specific person does, is that something that you, and just kind of exploring where that comes from, or even like you, the one that you asked is like or said that some people may be triggered by God. You may want to explore that. Like, where's that
Mhm.
coming from? Or
Yeah.
explore that with your therapist, or explore that with somebody, and just take a look into like the deeper. It's about digging into who you are, because a lot of us, I know
Mhm.
me, I buried a lot of things through denial over years, and guilt and shame, because I felt like, I didn't need those things. Like, I have a difficulty time crying, even though I want to, because I know it's a release.
Mhm.
Because like my dad, I cried in front of him, and he, instead of comforting me, which I didn't know, and I naturally expected, he just stared at me with disappointment and was
Mhm.
like, "This shouldn't be happening."
Mhm.
So, like that, and I didn't even know that was traumatic at the time, but it
Yeah.
ended up bleeding into who I became.
Mhm.
And, I really just wanted to become like a thug and a gangster, and,
Mhm.
like become like the rap artist, and actually, do criminal things so I could talk
Mhm.
about it and be that,
Mhm.
like, and it just ended up, like I found that through step work, and it was such a huge revelation, because like I'd be so angry and not know why, and not know the situation, and like I couldn't be who I naturally wanted to be, because like I'm putting on this mask that just was so exhausting. I'm
Yeah.
so glad I was able to put that down, because I'm not
Mhm.
there's nobody, like there's no reason to be like a gang. All of them end up in jail or killed, and like
Mhm.
it's just not fundamentally like a good thing to be. And it bled out, and I'm sure that it had everything to do with how I
Mhm.
started to treat women in my life. So,
Yeah,
including
and
my
looking for
mother.
family, of course, that's
Yeah.
usually the reason. Because I've worked with them. These are if you feel like the school shooter, right? And it's usually white males that they have mental illness, right?
Yeah.
I guarantee you, so is those gang members. They have mental illness too.
Oh yeah.
Suicidality for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And you often go look for family where you feel like you have none. So oftentimes when that's not addressed, sometimes you might create just another version of that same toxic family that you
Oh
came
yeah.
from, another space that you still can't be yourself. You still can't cry. You still have a lot of shame when, no fault to your own, but you don't know. You're just looking for it. Or you might be the kid that acts up in class, right? Uh, for
Yeah.
that teacher, you are easier for me to stand up to than it is my own parents right now. Or
Yeah. And
I'm
they're
not
just
getting the
trying to
attention at
protect
home. Yes, yes,
the
that
little
part.
boy
Yeah.
in them.
Exactly.
It's
They're trying to
I
protect
see
that.
those guys as just little boys that need a hug. That
Yes.
just need a hug, man. Like, and they're not at that place, but that's really the core of it. And
Oh
because I know
yeah.
that's who I am. I just need a hug. I love hugs. I
Right.
love being, it's just so much better.
It's definitely so much better. And there's documentaries that, people can watch and you'll see, that when they catch the teenagers and you'll see them on social media saying, oh, we're going to look for this person, they have mentors that will go and find them
Yeah.
and there'll be an older man or older woman that'll come and find one of the people that were commenting on going to go do something, and they'll be like, "Do you need a hug?" And when you see
Yeah.
these little boys just break down, like I'm talking
Yeah.
about with a gun on their hip, just breaking down and fall into that person's arms, like that's what it
Yeah.
is. you know?
It's what they're
It's a
looking for.
exactly, it's a reason, but the difference is acknowledging it, right? And having that support system and actively doing your best to love on yourself and put yourself in great situations to where you're not bleeding all over the people that didn't cut you, you know? So
Yeah,
that part,
definitely.
that I like that you also have that, you have that journal with those prompt questions and that's kind of what we call it's not a coping mechanism. That's what we call that
Yeah.
in the psychological sense, journaling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Having that
That's powerful.
right, having that self-discovery, and of course, part of the work that I do when it comes to those esoteric sciences, I love doing somebody's chart and giving them confirmation because when you understand yourself, to it's much easier to really, really explain yourself to other people or work on the things that trouble you. I
Yeah.
remember I had somebody that I would say something, and one of my friends said, she starts her conversations in her head. So you have to ask her why she came up with that. That's why she said it. Because people like, what? Where? That was random. That it's ADHD brains.
Yeah.
That person would be like, no, she starts her conversations in her head. Oh, like having that type of confirmation when you do these different charts or when you do the psychological work and you see a coach, it's like, okay, this is what it is. I'm not tripping. I'm not broken. This is just how I'm designed. It's so healing and it's a continuous process. Like it's not a one and done, once you journal or once you get a coach and things of that nature, the coach is there for that accountability. You said you wanted this. We're going to walk through this together, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, I love that. So listen, as we close here, Ron, tell everybody how they can find you, where they can get the book and things of that nature.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, if you want to step into my world, you can always find me at Don't Mind Me. I just have ADHD. That's my podcast. You can find that on Apple, Spotify, and your favorite platform. And like I'm going to be gifting your audience that 80, your 80, the my discovery journal, my
Yeah,
self-discovery journal. You can find that at youradhdguy.com. We talked about it. So if you want to really go deeper into that exploration of like why things keep showing up in your life, that's a great resource to have.
I love it. I love it. And of course, the resources you have them. So that means you don't have an excuse, guys. Okay. There's plenty of resources mentioned. All the guests that I have on my show, including myself, have resources for you. Have nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing. So why not?
Yeah,
And we're going to make sure that we have the links in the description of this episode when it airs. Please like, share, comment your thoughts on this episode. And also, if you feel like you need a break from social media, I still have my free resource, The Digital Soul Cleanse. You can find on my website, and it'll be linked to this
nice.
episode as well. If you need a break from that phone, okay, in your constant comparison, because comparison is the thief of all joy that a lot of
Yeah,
people like to do, especially us ADHDers. We have to work on that. All right. But
yeah,
just remember, everyone, your brain isn't broken. It's brilliant. And in ways the world is still learning, right? You're still learning how to understand. And if you can understand yourself, if we get more people understanding themselves and taking that step to really, really work on their healing, the world will be a better place. Okay. So
into
thank
that.
you all. Yes, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Ron, for joining. Okay,
Yeah,
and
thanks for
being a
having me.
guest. Yes, of course, of course, of course. I've truly enjoyed it, and I know who is listening out there. If you've enjoyed it, please share this with somebody who needs it. Okay. So, everyone, thank you again. And until next time, give yourself permission to not just live, but live and be great.